Today, we are giving you 4 players that could help you win your fantasy leagues in 2023.
That's right.
These are all players who are outside of either the top 12 or top 24 at their respective positions. So, do us a favor, go ahead and drop a like to show some love. Subscribe if you like fantasy content. And I want you to comment down below just before we start. Who's a sleeper name that you think will help people win their leagues here in 2023? And by the way, if you want to edge on your fantasy leagues this year, whether it's best ball, redraft, whatever the case may be, then go ahead and use our code LAND, L-A-N-D, at flockfantasy.com/land. You get a 2-day free trial, and then you get 30% off your membership if you go ahead and see the value in it, which I think you will. So, 4 players, 2 each. And again, the context is always important, so we like to clarify it. We had to find players who were outside the top 24 at their position according to ADP. We didn't want to do Stephon Diggs, Devontae Adams.
Exactly.
Hey, Saquon's going to win you your league. So that's the context of this video. So I'll go ahead and bring one of my first league winners. And a lot of people who are not in the dynasty community will probably be skeptical of this player. So let's talk about it. Jordan Addison. I believe Jordan Addison is going to help people win their leagues in 2023. Underdog ADP is wide receiver 36. In my rankings, I have him as wide receiver 29. Let's talk about the role that young rookie Jordan Addison is stepping into in Minnesota. Because honestly, if you guys don't know, we have a Dynasty channel. But over on that Dynasty channel, I was a little bit skeptical. Badake was a little bit skeptical because overall, our opinion was he would be perfect as an elite wide receiver 2 long-term. I'm not saying day one, right? But long-term, he would be this perfect complement like what Devonta Smith does for A.J. Brown and vice versa. But he's not someone that we could see being a true number 1 in an offense. Well, he lands in Minnesota, and this is the perfect role, okay? Wide receiver 2 was a huge need for this team going into the offseason, heading into the draft. Adam Thielen had just walked in free agency, leaving behind 107 targets, which are currently vacated. KJ Osborne, look, he's a fine player, but KJ Osborne's a 5th round pick, if I'm not mistaken. He's just a good complementary wide receiver 3. And if you look at this team at the end of 2022, maybe you're familiar, maybe you're not. Go back and watch some of those games. Justin Jefferson was getting double teamed a lot towards the end of the season. They were adding, another player to look over the top, extra help over the top with the safeties. No one on this team could take away coverage from Justin Jefferson. And if you were a defense preparing for the Vikings, it was pretty simple. Stop Justin Jefferson and you have a chance to win the game. Now enter Jordan Addison, who is a route running specialist. He will get a ton of one-on-one opportunities and he will win those opportunities. This is the perfect role for him. Like I said, he can be the Devonta Smith to A.J. Brown for Justin Jefferson. And if teams do double Justin Jefferson, they quickly will realize that they cannot, because Jordan Addison is no joke as a route runner. He is able to create separation with ease. And a lot of people might know this, a lot of people might not, but we're talking about a wide receiver who won the Blitnikoff Award in 2021 with Kenny Pickett. Y'all saw how Kenny Pickett performed last year?
Come on, Kenny.
Was it the chicken or was it the egg? I don't know. You let me know. But all I'm saying is Jordan Addison was an important part of Kenny Pickett being a first-round pick. He caught 100 balls that year, almost 1,600 yards through the air, and 17 touchdowns. Then he went to the Pac-12 with USC and Caleb Williams and still put up big numbers and played 3 less games. So some people might not know him, but go put on some Jordan Addison film. You will fall in love with him. Not the biggest guy, but we see that the NFL is changing. Smaller guys are able to be more and more successful in the modern day NFL. Secondly, the Vikings offense will present instant targets for Addison. Last year, with all the rookies in the 2022 class, the guy that I predicted would lead the year in production year 1 was Chris Olave. I just felt like it was a perfect situation for him. I felt like he was stepping into a very favorable scenario. This year for me, that is Jordan Addison. Now, JSN is my wide receiver 1 in Dynasty, but Addison is my wide receiver 1 in Redraft. And I think it's quite simple. Again, it has everything to do with the offense and the opportunity in front of Jordan Addison. Under Kevin O'Connell, the Vikings have been one of the league's heaviest passing volume offenses, and I don't see any end in sight. In fact, drafting a wide receiver in the first round would only support that idea. Not only drafting a wide receiver in the first round, but letting go of your franchise running back and Dalvin Cook. Those two moves indicate to us this is still going to be a very pass-happy team. Only 2 teams passed the ball more times per game last year than the Vikings. That's the Bucks. Listen to me for a second. Two teams, okay? 2 teams passed the ball more than the Vikings last year. This is important. The Bucks and the Chargers. What do we know about those 2 teams? Multiple fantasy wide receivers on both of those teams. The Bucks with Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. The Chargers with Mike Williams, Keenan Allen. And only 3 teams had more passing yards per game. That's the Chiefs, Bucks, and Chargers. Kevin O'Connell knows how to utilize his wide receivers. He has a history of it. After all, he was the offensive coordinator for the Rams in 2021 when Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods were fantastic for fantasy. This year in 2023, I guarantee you, Jordan Addison is going to be a big part of that team. Now, is he going to come out week 1 and put you 20 points on the board? No, but I'm saying league winners towards the end of the year, around week, let's say 3, 4, 5, 6, this is going to be a startable asset, undoubtedly, in my mind. And I've said this before, but I've never brought it up in a video. I've only said it in a live stream. The Vikings this year will be a fantasy factory, unquestionably in my mind. Like, the recipe is perfect for fantasy success offensively. Offense was not the problem last year, guys. The Vikings gave up the 2nd most yards per game to opponents in 2022. The only team that they did not give up more yards than, and it was by like 1 or 2, was the Detroit Lions. This defense was awful last year. They were the reason that, they had to score a bunch of points. They were consistently in and out of games. They added Byron Murphy, but they lost their best interior defensive lineman in Dalvin Tomlinson to free agency. So I don't think they really got all that much better. This team is going to have to put up huge points. There will be scenarios where they're coming from behind. I mean, remember last year, this team set a record for the biggest comeback of all time. That's because the offense is great. The defense is not. So your pass catchers are going to be in a great situation here. Kirk is going to be slinging the ball all over the field. And I think Jordan Addison will be the number 1 producing rookie wide receiver in 2023. Even though Jason's my dynasty wide receiver 1, Addison is the number 1 out of these rookies for this year. And I don't see how he doesn't beat his ADP of wide receiver 36. He will beat that ADP. So book it.
Yeah. Look, I definitely love the take. Jordan Addison steps into a massive opportunity now that Adam Thielen is no longer there. So definitely love the take. All right, my first guy this year, already a controversy, which you guys know me. I kind of like to throw some wild takes here, but I'm actually really excited about this play, and that is Cam Akers. Okay, Cam Akers.
Tell us.
Currently on underdog right now. Surprisingly, before I even looked into it, I was like, he's going to be outside the top 24 running backs, but he's actually RB23. He's my RB21. And I think the only reason why he's RB23 currently right now, because there's a lot of question marks with some running backs, like Dalvin, like Alvin. I would even say Javonte Williams are in question, obviously, with that injury. And I think once we get a full understanding where those guys are, let's say Javonte is playing, he's leading up to the season. He's going to start play week 1, whatever that workload looks like. I think, Cam Akers is always going to shoot down the ADP boards because not that many people love Cam Akers. But before we really get into Cam and why I believe he's league winner, let me remind you what happened literally his whole career, right? Okay. He was a 2nd round running back out of Florida, drafted in 2020 by the Rams. That rookie season, he missed a lot of the time. He didn't really get the full workload until about week 12, week 14, where we really saw him emerge in the second half of the season, which in reality made him a 3rd, 4th round pick in your redraft leagues the next year coming into that year. Because I was, in Dynasty, I was drafting him in the late 2nd, really excited about the opportunity that he was getting at that time. And then what happens? He tears his Achilles during the offseason, puts him out completely the whole year. But he does come back, I think week 18, comes back week 1 of the playoffs. Whether he looked good or not was up to you. You can determine that however you like. But I think the recovery time, was pretty incredible. And the fact that he was able to come back and get his feet wet before the season even ended, I thought was pretty incredible, right? Now let's fast forward to 2022 opening game with Cam Akers against the Buffalo Bills. I was a believer saying that Cam Akers, he should get a run. He should get an opportunity. doesn't even get the first snap of the game, doesn't even start the game with this team, and already a shaky start here with Sean McVay. Not only that he didn't, I guess at the time, wasn't getting the opportunity, he was having beef with Sean McVay, which hindered him throughout that whole season until the second half of the season, right? Second half of the season, he comes in and he finishes RB4 from weeks 13 to 18, over 104 targets, average, that's 17 attempts per game, mind you, over 500 yards, 6 touchdowns, 17.7 fantasy points per game. Without a doubt, it was terrible the first half of the season. Darrell Henderson was definitely part of that. But also, I know a lot of people are going to say, well, Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp weren't there. I completely agree. When I really look back into the past of this offense, all three of these guys weren't on the field at the same time getting a full workload. Cooper Kupp, when Cam Akers got drafted, he wasn't the Cooper Kupp we all know and love at the moment. He wasn't the wide receiver one. This was before the breakout. Matthew Stafford wasn't even on this team. So then in the whole 2021 season, Cam Akers, Matthew Stafford, we didn't see that. With Cooper Kupp, we didn't see that. Now, and coming into last year, at the second half of last year, Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp weren't on the field. Now, a lot of people would say, well, the only reason why Cam Akers was getting all this opportunity was because of Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp weren't on the field. And hey, maybe that's going to change when they're on the field. I would argue that, if anything, they should have more work in the secondary towards Cooper Kupp, maybe opening up the run game for Cam Akers. So that's one thought process. But when you really look at the opportunities Cam Akers throughout his whole career, since 2020 when he came into the league, he's only at those weeks 13 to 18, he was averaging 73% snap share. That's the highest he's ever averaged in his whole career. There was only 1 week where he averaged over 50% of a workload. I think it was like week over 55% of the workload. That was week 13 in 2020. He has never had the full workload because in his rookie year, he was a rookie. So, when does the rookies usually get the workload? Normally in the second half of the season. Gets injured 2021 and has the whole beef with Sean McVay in 2022 until the second half. We are finally going to see Cam Akers, I hope and believe, to be this full workhorse running back, 15, 17 attempts on the ground here with Cooper Kupp, here with Matthew Stafford. And with the ADP, in my opinion, going to be continue to drop with the knowing of Alvin Kamara, with the knowing of Dalvin Cook, with the knowing of all these other running backs that may be in question marks for you in the community, we're going to see Cam Akers become a really good value at some point, which makes me believe he can turn into a league-winning running back. So, once again, it's a controversy. I know a lot of people don't like Cam Akers, but the numbers speak for it, right? Once again, RB4 in that weeks 13 to 14. And if you really extrapolate that, which I know a lot of people don't like to do that, if you would take that pace from weeks 13 to 18 with that full workload, he would have finished as the RB5. Now, that's hard to say at times because I know extrapolation is really tricky, but I think that's pretty impressive if he finally gets over, 65% of the workload on the ground. So if he can maintain that, I think that would be phenomenal. And you guys know me, if you're on a Dynasty channel, I'm not a massive Zach Evans believer. He's not somebody that I really saw get drafted higher in the rounds. He got drafted in the 6th, 7th round. Now, can he take opportunity away from Cam Akers? Maybe in the air. But I think Cam Akers, no doubt, is going to be the first or second down guy with a goal line opportunity every single time. So I think Cam Akers will definitely help you win leagues this year.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a bad take. The only reason I was out on Akers last year is because of the price. The price has come to a point where it's much more reasonable now. Last year, one of my biggest avoids. This year, I'm with you. Like, I think the price is worth the pick. And there's a wide range of outcomes, but that's the whole point of players who are, kind of inside that running back 24, outside that running back 24. You cheat a little bit, but I'm going to give it to you. I
cheated just a little bit. And one thing I want to say before you go to your take, this is his second year removed from the Achilles injuries. I know we haven't seen the history of it. The history is not successful, is not positive whatsoever, but hopefully we can finally see somebody breaking that mold, especially with the success that we saw in the second half of the season. So there's definitely, like you said, complete two different narratives this way this Cam Akers can go, but I'm really leaning on the positive side here with Cam Akers if he continues to stay at this ADP.
All right, you talked about a running back that you like. I'll talk about one that I like. I mean, I'm not saying this will be a my guy, but it feels like he is one of the most disrespected running backs in all of fantasy for the last couple years. And someone commented on a video a couple months ago that when I talked about James Conner and said, he is the Tyler Lockett of running backs, and that's what we're talking about today. Is James Conner. Underdog ADP currently has him as an RB27. He's my RB19. By the way, if you guys aren't signed up on Underdog just yet, it's so fun. Best ball pick'ems. I mean, it's a great way to just continually be drafting fantasy leagues and not spending too much, just having a good time with it. Use our code LAND LAND. You'll get your deposit matched back all the way up to $100. So you put 100, you get 100. Link in the description. But let's talk about James Conner. Again, my RB19. So I am 8 spots higher than ADP. Look, we say this every year. And oftentimes I think people overthink certain players. The reality is, gun to your head, volume is king. At the end of the day for fantasy, what do we really care about for these players? It's volume. Volume is everything. It really is. And James Conner will be the clear number one on this team, unquestionably. Heading into the NFL draft this offseason, I thought this team could very well draft a young running back as they're trying to get younger. But I think they're more strategic with that plan. They're getting younger in other areas, and then eventually, maybe next year, they're going to address the running back room. But if you look at this depth chart right now, it's James Conner and it's Keontae Ingram. Keontae Ingram was a 6th-round pick in 2022. If you draft James Conner, and I know people are going to comment, James Conner's always injured, James Conner's always injured, then draft Keontae Ingram in the last round of any format, right? I mean, that is your instant insurance policy if you're that worried. But outside of Keontae, outside of James Conner, it's Corey Clement, it's Tyson Williams. None of these running backs are true threats to James Conner. Barring an injury, he will be the RB1 for this team in 2023. And for fantasy, he was actually so good last year. That's what I'm saying. I feel like the disrespect, it's almost like Tyler Lockett. Someone mentioned that in the comments. It feels very similar. He is always underrated and undervalued. Last year, he finished as the RB19. Look, that on its own is impressive. But it's more impressive when you realize that he missed 4 games. So let's look at what he was on track to do. What was his 17-game pace? He played 13 games. He finished as an RB19. If he played 17 games and we extrapolated his numbers, he was on pace to have over 1,400 all-purpose yards, 60 receptions, and finishing as a top 7 running back in fantasy football. And maybe you're sitting there and you're saying, I don't like extrapolation. Anything could have happened. Points per game is a better metric. Well, let's look at points per game then, because he was better than a lot of your favorite fantasy running backs, okay? In 2022, James Conner had more points per game than Ramondre Stevenson, then Aaron Jones, Leonard Fournette with Tom Brady, Alvin Kamara without competition in his backfield, Dalvin Cook, Ken Walker with no Zach Charbonnet, Najee Harris, and Jonathan Taylor. James Conner was the RB10 in points per game. What do you have to tell me? Why do we not, how is he the RB27? How is he the RB27? And I already know there's going to be people commenting right now saying, well, there's no Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray's not there. You got to know this. You don't know football. Well, I understand Kyler Murray's not there. And yes, the team as a whole will be better with Kyler Murray. The offense as a whole will be better with Kyler Murray. I don't think any of us really know when he's going to be back. But if you're concerned about James Conner without Kyler Murray, why don't I put some of that concern to rest? Because he was actually great without Kyler Murray. In fact, he was a superstar without Kyler Murray. So with Kyler Murray versus without, you see the touches. We're looking at 5 more touches a game. We're looking at more than a full target per game. Total yards per game, over 20 total yards per game. And then on a points per game basis, with Kyler Murray, he was the RB26. Without Kyler Murray, on a per game basis, he was the RB3 in fantasy football. So you might ask yourself, that's so strange. Why is that? That's because the offense runs through James Conner when there's no Kyler Murray. And if you look at this team now, right, you've got no DeAndre Hopkins, you have Hollywood Brown, Rondell Moore, Michael Wilson, who I love. But this year in 2022, or 2023 rather, James Conner is going to be an absolute feature. If you're looking for guaranteed touches for a very cheap price, James Conner is the answer. Now, am I sitting here saying he's going to finish top 10? No, because I don't have him ranked that way. But I think he will absolutely be an RB2, 100%. And he does have a chance to help people win leagues. Without Kyler, this team is built around James Conner. So go get you some, because I think the price is very, very affordable at the moment.
Yeah, James Conner, and sheesh, an interesting guy. I'm excited to see what he looks like. Hopefully he can stay healthy. That's my biggest concern. With James.
And a lot of people comment that when I talk about James Conner. James Conner's going to miss time. A lot of players are going to miss time, guys. A lot of players. Even last year, he missed 4 games. He finished as the RB19. You know what I mean? And he was healthy at the right time. James Conner helped people win leagues in the fantasy playoffs. So I definitely hear the concern. A lot of players get injured, though,
Yeah,
it's not predictive.
Exactly. A lot of players get injured. All right. My last guy here, I've been talking about him all off season in Dynasty. And I think it's going to be the exact same thing. I think for sure he's going to be my guy this year, and that is Elijah Moore. Wide receiver for the Cleveland Browns, current underdog ADP wide receiver 45. He's my wide receiver 33, and I think that's going to continue to rise. In Dynasty, he's my wide receiver 28. So I'm significantly high in him on Dynasty, and the longevity in redraft I still believe is going to continue. I think a lot of people also forget with Elijah Moore how talented he was in the class that he came into. He was a first pick in the second round, the 2021 class coming out of Ole Miss, with a phenomenal class. Jamar Chase, Devonta Smith, Kadarius Toney, Rashad Bateman, Jalen Waddle. The list goes on, to be completely honest with you, and the talent is still there. I think a lot of people also forget the team that he got drafted to with Zach Wilson and the Jets, which really hindered him coming into the season. And I think we all had high hopes, obviously, with Zach Wilson at the time, with this Jets team, this Jets organization. We were really excited on him. But the history with this team, with the New York Jets and the quarterbacks he's played with for the past 2 years hasn't been exciting. Zach Wilson, Mike White, and Joe Flacco, all guys that we all know are not going to be starters at some point, are just not starters anymore, right? They're not the guys on their respective teams, which now leads me to, the grades that they were getting at the time, according to PFF. Terrible quarterback play. 2021 PFF for the Jets graded 26 amongst offenses, which is terrible. And in 2022, PFF passing grade 31st for the New York Jets and Elijah Moore. So if you're thinking about Elijah Moore, be like, well, he did terrible, he did bad. It was actually overall as a team, it was pretty bad. Zach Wilson, the quarterback play. And I can really break it down when it comes down to the wide receiver and what Elijah Moore did. But I really encourage you to go watch it on a Dynasty channel, because this is a little bit different in a redraft perspective. But now when you come into this new offense with this new team with Deshaun Watson, yes, Deshaun Watson, we saw him in the second half of the season last year, but we know the history of him. And I kind of wanted to bring back the PFF passing grades for the 2 years that he played fully before he kind of went out with the Houston Texans. And in 2019, it was a top 12 PFF passing grade at the time. And in 2020, he was top 8 in the PFF passing grade as well, with that offense as a whole. Now he goes to the Cleveland Browns with this amazing team of Amari Cooper, Nick Chubb, Elijah Moore here now. It's going to continue, and I think we're going to see success, right? And we've seen Deshaun Watson have success with wide receivers like a DeAndre Hopkins, who was wide receiver 1 in 2018. DeAndre Hopkins, who was wide receiver 5 in 2019. Same thing, Brandon Cooks, wide receiver 17, and Will Fuller, before his injury, he was a wide receiver 8. He is phenomenal. Deshaun Watson knows how to produce fantasy-relevant wide receivers no matter what teams he's on, in my personal opinion. I think he's going to do that this year, and this offense is going to change. I know a lot of people are saying, well, this offense is going to be run first, right? This offense has historically been run-first team. Deshaun Watson, this organization has said, we're going to be opening up the playbook. We're going to be throwing a lot more. Every single report has saying this offense is going to change. I think that's why a lot of people are shaky now about Nick Chubb. If you're shaky about Nick Chubb and questioning Elijah Moore, I mean, you have to choose one, right? I think, in my opinion, I will be going Elijah Moore, especially with the value that you can get right now on him, wide receiver 45. One last thing, just to break it down, to really give you a perspective, not going too deep into Elijah Moore's routes, but the way the Jets used him. Elijah Moore was specifically a slot wide receiver coming out of Ole Miss. The first 2 years with the Jets, he was predominantly outside, out wide. And you can probably see on your screen 70% out wide versus 28 in 2021, 50%. Then you saw it switch a little bit in 2020, 50% out wide versus 49%. But when you look at his college stats and where he was placed on the field, he was always predominantly outside. He didn't even pass 20% outside in the 3 years he was there, which means that if we truly read this offense correctly, which I'm hoping for as well, Amari Cooper on the outside, Elijah Moore in the slot, and Donovan Peoples-Jones or Cedric Tillman, on the outside, which puts Elijah Moore right back where he knows and loves. So phenomenal price right now. I think if there was somebody I'd rather draft on, I would rather have on this team would be Elijah Moore over Amari Cooper. I think Amari Cooper is like a top 15, top 20 wide receiver right now, currently on the dog, and the value right now that you can get for Elijah Moore is phenomenal. So I do believe he will be a breakout player. He's going to be a my guy for sure. So keep an eye out on Elijah Moore.
Yeah, and you see that slot usage in 2022. Obviously, the arrival of Garrett Wilson, it makes sense. And, so many wide receivers, just players in general in the NFL, oftentimes players that we love who aren't successful, sometimes it's, hey, they just weren't who they thought that they were. Other times it's this coaching staff did not utilize him properly. That's why schemes, offenses, roles are so important in the NFL.
Yeah.
And Elijah Moore is best suited to be a slot wide receiver. This seems like the perfect situation for him. So let's see if it ends up being a breakout year.
Yeah.
Guys, thanks so much for watching the video. Drop a like to show some love. Subscribe if you like fantasy football.
Come on.
And we'll see you in the next one. All love. Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, LAND, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.
It's so easy. Even your grandma could scan that QR code right there.